What's up, people? How are you doing? I hope everything is more than fine wherever you are. I'm Pepe Cuenca and I welcome you to the game of the day of round number 3 of the Shamkir Super Tournament or Gashimov Memorial. Today I bring you a really interesting game that happened between Viswanathan Anand, the ex-world champion, the Tiger of Madras, and Anand-Mamedyarov. Two big fishes, two top players, right? That have been in the top 10 for a lot of years, and the game has been very interesting. It has been a roller coaster, so with a lot of ups and downs. So it's pretty complex. So I hope you guys enjoyed the game as much as I did when analyzing it. So yeah, let's just cut the bullshit, right, and then start analyzing what happened in the 64 squares in this game between Viswanathan and Mamedyarov. So Bishi plays e4 and Mamedyarov replied with e5, knight f3, knight c6 and bishop c4. The so-called Italian opening. Here more options. You can play the Scotch with d4, you can play the Spanish relope with bishop e5. Those are the main alternatives. But bishop c4, really natural move, putting pressure on f7. This is the best diagonal by far for this bishop. Mamedyarov replied with bishop c5, doing the same, putting the bishop in the best diagonal. Knight f6 also possible, but here is if you want to play this with the black pieces, you also have to study this variation with knight g5, which is extremely dangerous. So bishop c5 was played, and now short castle by Viswanathan. Here c3 is also one of the main lines. The idea is after knight f6, you can play d3, entering in the gioco piano, or you can also play d4. After knight f6, d4, ed. You can take back with the pawn, or you can play e5, which is very trendy nowadays in the top players. Among the top players. Sorry. So after bishop c5, short castle was played by Viswanathan, knight f6, and d3. Really natural and humble move, protecting the pawn, right? And Mamedyarov does the same by playing d6. And whenever you have played d6, black includes the possibility of going knight a5, aiming to trap this bishop and win the bishop pair. That's why c3 is played in many of these positions, not only to prepare for a b4 or a d4, installing a nice center, but also to give this c2 square to escape to the bishop in case of some knight a5 ideas. So a6 was played. This is a really natural move in the Italian as well. So you want to put this bishop on a7. The bishop on a7 is doing the same job in this diagonal, but also it's not hit by any b4 or d4. So a4 was played. Normally white tries to expand in pawns on the queen side, and bishop a7. As we say, this is a prophylactic move against b4 or d4. And here knight a3 was played, and some of you could be asking, Pepe, what is this knight a3? I thought my teacher told me when I was a kid that one of the main plans in the Italian or real Lopez is to play h3, rook e1, knight d2, knight f1, and knight g3, right? Of course, this is pretty standard, but this knight a3 move has become very trendy in the last years among the top players. The idea is pretty interesting. You want to go knight c2, you want to play bishop e3, and then to fight against this bishop on a7. When black takes on e3, you want to take back with the knight on e3, and this knight controls pretty important squares as d5 or f5. So this is the idea behind knight a3. Knight e7 was played. This maneuver is also very typical in the Italian. You want to put the knight on g6, and then you control f4. You also protect e5, and then you are prepared to start some sort of c6 and d5 ideas to gain more control on the center. So knight c2 was played, knight c6 and bishop e3, fighting against this a7 bishop, sorry. Takes on e3, and short castle. And this position is pretty solid for both colors. And now Viswanathan played queen c2, protecting the rooks, and also is preparing for some d4, because you have to protect the e4 pawn if you want to play d4, right? That's why the queen on c2 is better placed than on d2, let's say, because you are preparing for some d4 ideas. And here there were different alternatives for Mamedyarov. For example, rook e8 playing prophylactically against this d4, because now after ed there will be a lot of pressure on the e4 pawn, but also c6 is pretty interesting. So black now is ready also to strike in the center with d5. Here Vishy Anand played a5, really interesting move, stopping black's queenside, right, and fixing the structure. And here Mamedyarov played d5. In this moment, Vishy Anand decided to go back to b3 and not take on d5, because this would give black a nice center, right? And after bishop b3, it's important to note that you shouldn't take on e4 here with the black piece. If you take on e4 here, after d takes e4, this bishop on b3 has become a real monster now, and it's enjoying a fantastic diagonal from a2 to g8, right? So that's why it's never easy to solve the tension in the center, and Mamedyarov plays bishop e6, pretty natural move, developing the piece, protecting d5, and at this point Vishy Anand decides to take on d5 and then play d4, changing the course of the game. And of course here e takes d4 would be, let's say, an strategical mistake, because now black would have an isolated pawn, and white could enjoy some extra pressure at some point with some endgames, for example. So that's why after d4, Mamedyarov plays e4, and Vishy's idea is to play knight e5, installing nice corcel on the center. The point is, black can't really take on e5, because after d takes e5, knight d7, for example, black is in trouble. You're just losing a pawn. Bishop takes e5, boom, 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 and white just wins a pawn, right? Which is very tasty in the morning. It's 8 a.m. in Madrid here, and we're talking about chess, right? Instead of having breakfast. What is this? Alright, so that's why after knight e5, Mamedyarov plays queen d6, putting pressure on this knight on e5. And here you have two options. You have, you can play knight takes e6 or f4, trusting in Facundo, the f-pawn, the superhero. Here knight g6, a takes e6, rook a4 was very interesting, to play rook b4 and then put some pressure on the b7 pawn. You can see that this pawn on a5 is gonna be a problem for white, and I'm gonna explain you that in a moment. So Vishy play f4, e takes f3, and pass and capture, and now knight f3, and rook a e8. I wanted to talk about this position because it looks pretty solid for both sides, but the problem for white is that you can't really bring this rook to the action, to the e file, because the pawn on e5 is gonna suffer. The only way of protecting this a5 pawn is to play some b4 ideas, but then the pawn on c3 would be extremely weak. So that's why the position is not that easy to play for the white pieces, because the natural move rook a to e1 runs into some queen c7 or queen d8 ideas, and probably you'll have to go back to a1, and this is not good business for white, right? So rook f e1 and bishop d7. Now Mamedyarov is that, okay, if my job with this bishop is to protect the d5 pawn, I can do it from c6, and also I can try to go to b5 at some point, because now here I will enjoy some nice diagonal, and removing the bishop from e6, this allows me to double rooks at some point, rook e7, rook f e8, because the rook on f8 is just doing nothing. It's a rook which is punished by his friends. It's a rook who suffered bullying when he was in high school, and people used to take his sandwich during the break time. So it's a sad rook, let's say. But this rook on e8 is just the king of the party, right? It's much more happy. And here it's not easy to say a move for the white pieces, because what you want to do, maybe you want to bring this bishop to c2, but in order to do that you had to move the queen. If you move the queen to e2 or d3 or e2, then can be hit by a knight on f4. Then also you move the queen to d4, there's knight e4 coming. You can't move this rook because the pawn on a5 will be hanging. So that's why it's extremely hard to play here with the white pieces. That's why Vishy Anand played g3, covering this f4 square. It's weakening the king a little bit, but then at the same time you're fighting against this knight on g6. And Mamedyarov gave some fresh air to his king playing h6, and queen g2 was played by Vishy Anand. It can't be hit by a knight on f4. Now maybe you want to bring this bishop back to the action on c2. Rook e7 was played by Mamedyarov, and here knight c2. Now Vichy goes for a plan which is maybe not the best, but the position is very tricky. It's already tricky to play. So for example, if you play bishop c2 instead of knight c2, rook e8, knight f5, rook e1, knight e1, this looks like also interesting for black after bishop f5, let's say. But knight c2, f8, and the thing is, Vichy played knight b4 intending to go knight d3. Of course, if white manages to play knight d3 and then to put a knight on e5, could be even better. So that's why Mamedyarov stops that by playing bishop b5, protecting, covering the d3 square. And now it's also threatening to go rook e2, right? For example, you play something passive like bishop c2, rook e2 is a big boom, because after rook e2, you are forcing the white queen to go to h3. And now after knight e4, black is extremely active in this position, and white is gonna suffer a lot. Then Jean is saying +2 or something, so you can see how serious is this. But rook e7 was played, rook e7, and now bishop d1 to cover the e2 square. Because if you play rook e1, after exchanging these rooks, you play knight e7, and at some point you're gonna play some queen d8, and the pawn on a5 is gonna fall. That's why bishop d1 was played, and h5 by Mamedyarov. You have another interesting break here with h4, and that's why Mamedyarov goes for h5. Here Vichy plays queen h3, trying to stop this h4 idea, and Mamedyarov tries to show who's the boss in this position, and he plays bishop d7, queen g2, bishop b5, queen h3, just to let Anand know that he's going for the win, and he plays h4 anyway. And some of you would be asking to yourself at home, Pepe, what is this? I don't get any shit. Why chess is so difficult? Why I can't just take this pawn with my pawn, or even with my knight? Well, there's a reason. Well, if you take with the knight, then now e1 is available, and after rook e1, king f2, queen e7, black is gonna checkmate you like 100 times, right? So that's why you can't really take with the knight. And if you take with the pawn, there's knight a4, and then after queen g3, there's knight e4, and a lot of active pieces for the white, for the black player. And let's say if you want to go to g4, bishop d7, queen is trapped. So not a good business. That's why after h4, white didn't take on h4, and instead he went for bishop c2. He is so desperate for finally bringing this rook to fight for the e-file. Now Mamedyarov takes on g3, and Mamedyarov is putting a lot of pressure on Vichy's Anand position during the last 10-15 moves. He has been playing extremely well, but as you can see, chess is a tough sport, and it's not decided until the last moment, and you're gonna see that this is gonna be a roller coaster from this point. So now the point is, you can't take with the pawn because there is rook e3. So that's why Vichy took with the queen. Of course, he wants black to take queens, and then this position would be more or less playable for white. But of course, now given the situation of this king, Mamedyarov doesn't want to trade queens and plays knight a4, also threatening knight to e2. That's why Vichy played king h1 and rook e3, and it looks like white has to resign like in few moves, right? Because now there is so many threats. Bishop e2 is coming, knight h5 is coming. Vichy plays rook g1, threatening checkmate in one move. Of course, these guys are not gonna allow this. And then Mamedyarov just plays g6. Queen f2 was played, rook e2, and queen to h4. And this is one of the key moments where Mamedyarov makes a big blunder. He was much better after the move knight f6 to h5. Of course, we always say we have big respect for these players, yeah, for every chess players in the world. It's so easy to talk about from outside the board, yeah. When we have to sit then in a tournament, you know, then we all make mistakes, even the best players in the world, right? So knight f6 to h5 was a fantastic move, because now it's extremely hard for white to say any move. There are many threats for black. So for example, if white played, let's say, if white plays knight e5, you can even take on e5. D takes e5, and queen takes e5, and there are so many threats. Bishop e2, even bishop e2, but followed by bishop f3 is almost unstoppable. For example, a3, bishop e2, and now it's really hard to stop bishop f3. And then if you play bishop d1, I can just take, and then queen e4 and queen g2 checkmate, right? So that's why not even possible to play knight e5. You play queen g4, which looks natural to protect f3, then e7, and basically you are threatening to go no. I thought my program collapsed, but no. Queen e7, you are threatening to go bishop d7. Let's say bishop b3, bishop d7, queen h4, and queen, not queen e5, but queen e3, and white has to resign. So we have analyzed knight e5, bishop d1. No, we have analyzed queen g4 and knight e5. After bishop d1, it's even possible to play queen e6. Because after you take on e2, bishop takes e2, let's say knight g5, or even knight e5, you're going to play f6. And then this f3 square or even e4 are going to be available for black. And then this is just checkmate, right? So after knight f6 to h5, white was in real trouble. But in time trouble, Mamedyarov played the move knight to e4. And this gives a lot of life to Anand. He took on e4, d takes e4, and knight e5. And as you can see now, white is threatening to take the knight on f4, and you don't have so many squares for this knight. If you go back to e6, then after queen f6, black is in real trouble. You are threatening to take, let's say, on f7, and if black protects on f8, then after rook g6 takes and takes, basically black has to resign. You take on g6, and then you play knight f7, and black's losing. So that's why you can only go to d3, because if you go to h5, just queen takes h5, and then white wins a game on the spot. So that's why Mamedyarov had to go to d3. And then there is a fantastic variation right now, a really beautiful variation at this moment, which is boom, queen to h8, king h8, knight f7, king h7, knight takes e6, and now we are in another extremely important moment of the game. The position is around equal, okay, but this is move 40, and then Mamedyarov has only 30 seconds in the clock, and he's got to make a move. Here, for example, after knight e1, aiming to go knight f3, it's even a little bit easier for black to play, or even knight f4. But Mamedyarov got really ambitious at this moment, and he went for bishop d7, which is a big mistake again. Why? He thought white couldn't take on e4, and then if white can't take on d4, maybe he's aiming to go bishop h3 and also knight f2. If white takes on d3, he takes d3, this pawn is going to be a queen very soon. But the thing is, he thought after knight e4, he was probably just going to take on b4, and after cb, bishop c6, and then this pin makes black winning the game. The problem is intermediate moves. After knight b4, he could play, Bishop could play knight f6 intermediate move, and after king h6, knight takes e7, and white is 2 pawns up and basically winning the game. That's why after knight e4, probably he was saying, oh my god, what have I done? This is the moment where you want to die in chess, and it's right after the time control, where you get 1 extra hour, and then you just want to die at that moment. So Mamedyarov played bishop f5 at this moment, knight to g5, sorry, king h6, and knight takes e3, bishop takes d3. And as you can see now, white is much better. It's 2 pawn up, and then this pawn is going to run like Usain Bolt. It's going to run like a beast. Rook g3 was played, attacking the bishop, giving some pressure to the king. Rook e1, king g2, rook e2, king g1, check, check, king f3, rook b2, king f4, attacking the bishop, and you can see this king has been centralized. This king is out of the play. So bishop f5, and Anand doesn't even want to protect this h2 pawn. He goes straight away to centralize his king, to push the pass pawn, rook h2, knight f7, king g7, knight d6, centralizing the knight, attacking b7, rook e2, king d5. After bishop e6, there's always king c5, so no problem. Now white's threatening to take on f5, king f6. Carlitos comes to the action, the c4 pawn, rook e7, protecting b7. Okay, you can take on b7. Don't do that because there's bishop e4, right? And black's winning the game. So c4, rook e7, rook f3, pinning this bishop, rook d7, c5, rook e7, rook f2, maybe aiming to go rook b2 at some point. We can say that after bishop a6, well, bishop a6 is not possible, so rook h7, and now Bishi Anand realized that after taking on f5, this endgame it is completely won for the white player. King d6, and basically white's plan is rather simple. You want to go d5 and c6, and after rook d8, which is stopping d5 at the moment because there's rook d8 and taking on d5, then white just plays the humble but beautiful and strong move rook d2. Now the thing is, after rook d8, you will just want to go king c7. You have protected the d4 pawn, and then you're gonna take the pawn on b5. So basically, white's idea is to go d5, king c7, and black has to resign. f4, king c7, check, king c8, and now d5, d6, d7 is just unstoppable. So f3, d5, and black had to resign. So you see how tough is chess. Like, Mamedyarov has been pushing extremely well for 20 moves, and then he managed to get a winning position almost, but then suddenly he makes a blunder, and he makes a second blunder, and Bishi wins the game. So for Bishi, maybe it's kind of a fair result in global, because in the first game he was almost winning against Navarra. Navarra saved the draw, and now Bishi gets 50% of the points of the tournament. Remember that Magnus is leading, and remember you can follow all the action in Chess24. We are doing Spanish commentary. If you don't understand Spanish, okay, you have also English commentary from the official website. So it's been a pleasure, guys, to analyze this game for you. So I hope you guys have a nice day. It's time to work, right? It's 8:20 in the morning. Let's go to work. See you in the next video. If you drink, don't drive. Bye bye, my friends.